How do you both define Nepal in one sentence?
I would say that Nepal is a beautiful country, small, landlocked, particularly because of this close relationship where India dominates almost everything that happens in Nepal. A lot of Indian influence which is perceived to be there. It's a perception more than reality sometimes. But the perception is that India is shaping everything that happens in Nepal.
Empathy है भी और नहीं भी है. At people to people level, there is empathy, no doubt about it. Official जब दिल्ली और काठमांडू के बीच में बात होती है तो many a times we see that empathy is lacking. But overall, both the countries are diverse, has diversity of different sorts. They are linkable and not linkable at the same times. We truly care for Nepal's sovereignty. But somewhere a few things we need to take note. First, the colonial hangover. जो experience था इंडिया का, because we were directly colonized by British forces. नेपाल डायरेक्टली कभी कॉलोनाइज नहीं हुआ बट इम्पैक्टेड था. वो साइक जो है इंडियन पॉलिसी एस्टैब्लिशमेंट में आज़ादी के बाद भी वो किसी न किसी फॉर्म में चलती रही एज ए लेगेसी.
नेपाल इज पार्ट ऑफ चाइना, भूटान इज पार्ट ऑफ चाइना एंड इंडिया वाज वेरी कॉन्शियस ऑफ दैट. एंड देन केम 1962. तब तक इवन द बॉर्डर एरियाज नियर चाइना देयर वाज फ्री मूवमेंट ऑफ पीपल बैक एंड फोर्थ. But after 1962, with the concurrence of the Nepal government, there were some border outposts that were set up on Indian territory.
Nepal used to be very close with India before 1991 in trade terms. After that, India has, moved to a different territory.
Sure.
So now they need to catch up, but we need to be little more generous.
The important thing is that India should not be thinking of going to the global high table and becoming a major global economic power by itself, leaving its neighbors behind, particularly Nepal.
Not only a neighbor, Nepal is like a younger brother.
Younger brother, absolutely. So Nepal should feel that riding on India's shoulders, it has a tremendous future, and that is what we are proposing again and again.
Kathmandu Chronicles, that's a brand new book I have in my hand, written by Ambassador K.V. Rajan and Atul K. Thakur. Welcome to ABP Live Podcast. How are you?
Thank you.
कहाँ से शुरुआत हुई कि कब सोचा कि ये किताब लिखनी चाहिए? I have read the छोटा मोटा premise की पास्ट हिस्ट्री के बारे में बहुत ज़्यादा नहीं है. करंट हिस्ट्री में बहुत कुछ हुआ है इंडिया एंड नेपाल के बीच में जिसको कभी किसी ने डॉक्यूमेंट बहुत अच्छे से नहीं किया. देयर आर राइटर्स ऑब्वियसली हु हैव रिटन अबाउट इंडिया एंड नेपाल, बट उस गैप को ब्रिज किसी ने नहीं किया. एंड यू गाइस थॉट ऑफ राइटिंग दिस, बट व्हाट एग्जैक्टली इज द स्टोरी बिहाइंड दिस?
वेल, आई विल टेल यू, फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल the credit for this joint venture should go to my friend Atul, because he was the one who provoked me into joining hands with him in writing the book. अब इसका ये किताब क्यों लिखा गया, मेरे ख्याल से it's a very simple explanation. India and Nepal, how should they learn from the past? Because the same story has been repeating itself in the India-Nepal relationship over the years. For the last 75 years, not a steady relationship at all.
And क्या है relationship for all those?
It's a very discontinuous kind of relationship where on the one hand you have very, very close bonds of family, of culture, of civilization, of history, geography, etc. On the other hand, a lot of fluctuation and a lot of misunderstandings, a lot of irritants, sometimes very serious ones. तो हम आपस में बात करते रहते थे. Both of us love Nepal, and हम लोग बार बार इस प्रश्न को पूछते रहते थे कि ये इसका असली कारण क्या है. And we came to the conclusion that both countries need to introspect and go deep into the reason as to why lessons have not been learnt from the past. Second, they have not quite learnt how to manage the present. And third, they have not quite agreed on how to shape the future. तो past, present, future तीनों में एक तरीके से एक गैप रहा है दोनों देश के बीच में. तो हम लोग बात करते रहते थे and then we said okay, it was Atul's idea. He said why don't we do a different kind of a book where I would put in my personal experience, my insights, my anecdotes, etc. And he with his scholarly aptitude and his research background would do the deep research. तो हम लोगों ने सोचा कि एक अलग तरीके से किताब लिखते हैं जिसमें we would be very frank, very honest, brutally honest as far as India is concerned, and many people will not, I think, appreciate that aspect. क्यों अतुल, आप कुछ कहना चाहेंगे?
Absolutely agree. So this is an unbiased account on India-Nepal relations, first of all. Second thing which you should take note of it, कि हम दोनों का background थोड़ा सा अलग रहा है. Sir has been a seasoned diplomat who had a tenure of almost 5.5 years in Nepal. So this is set of record by any Indian in Nepal. But he retired as the secretary in MEA and had seen many things firsthand. So the first section we totally devoted to his rich experiences, which are going to be helpful to all of us, all those who track India-Nepal relations very, very avidly. So जो official establishment में भी और बाहर में भी मेरा अपना लगभग 14 years plus का रहा है नेपाल में इन्वॉल्वमेंट, प्रोफेशनली और पर्सनली भी. पर्सनली तो शुरू से ही रहा है, प्रोफेशनली रहा है, एज ए राइटर, एज ए पॉलिसी मेकर इन डिफरेंट रोल्स. तो ये हमने देखा कि किताबें बहुत सारी आई हैं, ऐसा नहीं है मतलब नहीं है इंडिया नेपाल पे, लेकिन वो मोस्टली क्या था, उनका अपना एक पर्टिकुलर सेट ऑफ आइडियाज़ के साथ लिखी गई किताब थी. कुछ किताबें बहुत ही कंपल्सिव वे में लिखी गई थी, जो पहले से ही मतलब सोचा गया था कि क्या लिखना है. तो वो सब चीज़ों को थोड़ा जो मिसनोमर्स थे, थोड़ी जो मिसअंडरस्टैंडिंग्स थी, उसको भी क्लियर करने में हमने अपने एफर्ट्स को लगाया था. तो ये एक अनबायस्ड अकाउंट है. यदि मैं एक लाइन में सम अप करूँ, ये अनबायस्ड अकाउंट है और हमने बहुत ही केयरफुली लिखा है इस किताब को. हम इंडिया, व्हाइल बीइंग द इंडियंस, वी टुक अटमोस्ट केयर कि नेपाल के बारे में कोई मिसगिविंग्स नहीं हो, कोई मतलब कुछ ऐसा नहीं हो नैरेटिव जो डिस्टर्ब करे.
होगा कि नेपाल के बारे में कोई अच्छा नहीं है, वो तो अनबायस्ड है,
वो एक अलग चीज है. एक है डिस्टॉर्शंस हमने
We've tried to be honest.
honest.
अरे how do you both define Nepal in one sentence? What exactly is Nepal? Be as poetic as you want to be and be as natural as raw. Whatever you think of Nepal.
I would say that Nepal is a beautiful country, small, landlocked, but with a very complicated psyche vis-a-vis India, particularly because of this close relationship where India dominates almost everything that happens in Nepal. There is a lot of Indian influence which is perceived to be there. It's a perception more than reality sometimes. But the perception is that India is shaping everything that happens in Nepal. And there's too much of expectation.
Is it true?
It is unfortunately partly true, as we have examined and said very honestly, but mostly it is perception. And I would say that India's fault perhaps has been not to address those perceptions in time. If you address a perception in time, then it does not become a reality in terms of shaping attitudes and so on. So sometimes we don't take these perceptions very seriously. And the psyche of Nepal is something which we have not understood, and there is not enough empathy in India for Nepal and vice versa. So we don't put ourselves in each other's shoes to find out what it is like to be in the other country, in spite of the closeness.
Makes sense. Atul, what do you think?
So I will take just one line and the last page of the book, 258 page. So I will quote Anglo-Nepali writer Greta Rana. She had written that Nepal is a privilege and we should never forget that. So more or less we believe into that also, both of us. Nepal is a kind of privilege. So.
इंडिया और नेपाल के बीच में सिमिलैरिटीज क्या है? मतलब टेक्निकली एक तो कल्चर का एक बहुत बहुत बड़ा सिमिलैरिटी है. वी सी दैट एक कल्चरल एक्सचेंज है, एक एम्पैथी, सिंस यू एम्बेसडर राजन वाज मेंशनिंग कि एक एम्पैथी है, बट व्हाट आर फंडामेंटल
सिमिलैरिटीज? है और नहीं भी है.
हाँ, एम्पैथी है और नहीं भी
है. So diversity, sir, you.
No, I would say we think alike. We have a common ethos.
Okay.
जो कहते हैं, we react to happenings around us in the same fashion. So the mindset is basically not very different. But Nepal is because of history and so on, how the British treated Nepal in the beginning, it's a legacy of history, that Nepal has been isolated from the rest of the world. So it has been far behind India in many ways, far behind even neighboring states in India. So that has also shaped its attitudes. But otherwise, actually, the commonality is very, very obvious to anyone who goes to Nepal and vice versa. That is why we feel so much at home when we go to Nepal. So there is a lot of similarity, but it is it's a common civilization, but it is a different sovereign country with a totally different history, different sense of national identity, which we don't sometimes appreciate very much.
So do we relate to it? We Indians can't, right?
No, I don't think we relate to it as much as we should. We take it somewhat for granted, and we don't take it as seriously as we should. But I think this is something that Nepal misses most of all in terms of its friendship with India. Deep down, they are really, my personal feeling is they're not capable of being really anti-India in the real sense of the word, although we keep hearing of anti-Indianism in Nepal. But they feel that India doesn't give them that sense of sovereignty, that sense of equality, which is their due. And we tend to take them for granted.
Okay.
Atul, what do you say?
Absolutely, sir, absolutely. The problem is that many a times, as sir has said it in our outset, कि perceived है, perceptions है, realities कुछ और है. Empathy है भी और नहीं भी है. At people to people level, there is empathy, no doubt about it. Official जब दिल्ली और काठमांडू के बीच में बात होती है, तो many a times we see that empathy is lacking. But overall, both the countries are diverse, has diversity of different sorts. They are linkable and not linkable at the same times. We truly care for Nepal's sovereignty, no doubt about it. In the book, we have written it in detail. But somewhere, a few things we need to take note. First, the colonial hangover. जो experience था इंडिया का, because we were directly colonized by British forces. नेपाल डायरेक्टली कभी कॉलोनाइज नहीं हुआ, बट इम्पैक्टेड था. वो साइक जो है इंडियन पॉलिसी एस्टैब्लिशमेंट में आज़ादी के बाद भी वो किसी न किसी फॉर्म में चलती रही एज ए लेगेसी. सो दैट पार्ट वी नीड टू टेक वेरी वेरी सीरियसली.
मैं एक चीज़ कहूँगा कि देयर इज़ अ सर्टेन एब्सेंस ऑफ ट्रस्ट बिटवीन इंडिया एंड नेपाल विच इज़ वेरी पाल्पेबल, विच यू कैन which translates itself into the day-to-day relationship also between the two countries. And that is very, very unfortunate. That is something which we have to address. We must try and build bridges of trust with Nepal, because in a sense it is the most important neighbor of India.
True.
We tend to underestimate its importance in a strategic sense. It's extremely important for India to have that kind of trust with Nepal, and it is never too late.
But do you think ये जो trust का एक जो deficit आ रहा है, it is because of China? Does China have a?
It is a factor, big factor.
It's a big factor,
It's
no
a big
doubt.
factor, no
मतलब
doubt.
ये कोई भी deny नहीं कर सकता कि
No.
China factor नहीं है.
बिल्कुल
नहीं,
factor.
चाइना फैक्टर तो पहले से रहा है, ब्रिटिश के ज़माने में भी. That is why they created this feeling in Nepal that they should not trust India. इनसे दूर रहिए. उन्होंने पहले से वो एक ब्रेन वॉश करके रखा था काठमांडू वैली एलिट में. लेकिन उसके बाद China came to Tibet and it began to talk about part of India being Chinese territory, Middle Kingdom era se. They said Nepal is part of China, Bhutan is part of China, and India was very conscious of that. And then came 1962. Tab tak even the border areas near China, there was free movement of people back and forth. But after 1962, with the concurrence of the Nepal government, there were some border outposts that were set up on Indian territory.
Okay.
And at that time, nobody knew what was Indian territory and what was Nepalese territory, because
Everything was
farmers
free
used to
form.
go back and forth all the time. तो उससे confusion शुरू हुआ. This border dispute has its origins since those days. It is very unfortunate, but China then, initially it was Nepal, which got this idea that they should play the China card. India से और extra करे. India was introducing Nepal to the world, bringing development to Nepal, building bridges, building roads, building airports, building hospitals, universities, etc. India was the first country, the only country to do that.
Who acknowledged Nepal as a country
Yeah,
in its true
absolutely.
sense.
We had a vision for Nepal. We wanted development there. But then China, the Chinese shadow was there, and we had to make sure that nothing was done in Nepal which was contrary to Indian interest in the long term. So the idea of calibrating Nepal's democracy slowly came about, and that is where the distrust came in Nepal. कि इतना expectations था, they had fought alongside us for our freedom from the British. Nepalese leaders went to jail with our leaders. And then when Nehru came with this vision of democracy and development in Nepal, ending its isolation, they had very high expectations. But वो democracy में थोड़ा बहुत एक caution था इंडिया की तरफ से. Development तो जोरों से चलता रहा, but they felt that they were not fully independent as they expected to be. Their political leaders also felt sometimes let down by India. So उससे distrust शुरू हुआ, and China initially was not taking sides between India and Nepal, although they kept up their claims. Later, the Chinese also became a little more ambitious, and they started playing the China card themselves. And now China is out in the open. They are interfering in Nepal's internal affairs.
In all the walks
they are
of
warning
life.
Nepal कि India से आप India, you are very unfortunate that you have a neighbor like India, etc., etc. And India-China relations are going through a bad phase. And the Chinese are, frankly, I don't mind saying this, they are up to very serious strategic mischief in Nepal, because they see Nepal as an ideal playground in which they can play their games against India. And India has to be very, very careful. We cannot carry on business as usual with Nepal, a development project here, some ambulances here, some aid there, etc., etc. We have to have a strategic counter plan, because in the long term, China always thinks in a long-term sense. The Chinese are planning to make Nepal, in my view, a kind of a launching pad to further their own ambitions in South Asia. So it is a very serious plan.
So China has been, has been creating a geostrategic hotspot in Nepal, and they have succeeded to an extent. They have been badly using and misusing the mass media. They have been creating a pool of scholars, funded scholars. They have been doing everything possible to change the narrative, which was in favor of sound India-Nepal relations. तो कई fronts पे चल रहा है, and it has a lot of pull effects. China has strong pull effects. तो उनकी पूरी एक strategy, grand strategy है वहाँ पे as an expansionist force.
But क्यों ताकि geopolitics को tackle किया जा सके, इंडिया और चाइना का जो conflict है उसको amplify किया.
Yeah, so we have a strategy, counter strategy, and that has been development partnership, precisely. So India has not ceased to be the main development partner of Nepal, even to the date. We account for more than 75% trade. More than 75% trade happens through India only in Nepal. So there we are succeeding. We are no longer making the mistakes of the past. We are totally focusing on developmental side. Now China is doing some kind of mistakes.
The Chinese are certainly making spectacular progress, I would say, in Nepal. They have very deep pockets, and they have no sense of accountability, etc., unlike India. So they are able to influence a poor country like Nepal much more easily. And there's absolutely no doubt that political leaders, first rung, second rung, third rung, their families, children, scholarships, exchange programs, language programs, Confucian institutes.
And political instability, which is a
permanent. And political interference, direct. They've been trying to keep the leftist parties together. Only the other day they managed to get the Maoist party and the Communist party. They've been trying again and again to get them to unify into one single party. Earlier it was one single party, then they broke up. The Chinese were very unhappy they were very happy when they again came together in a coalition a few days back. But personal differences between the leaders, the communist leaders and the Maoist leaders, their appetite for power, that overcame the urge to keep the Chinese happy. So again, they have broken apart. So the Chinese must be feeling a little unhappy. But I think they will continue with their efforts because they have won over quite a few people now.
Okay.
And they feel that the left is their best long-term strategic partner. And their whole idea is to have a different kind of a democracy in Nepal, not the Western model multi-party democracy.
And what exactly is that kind of a democracy?
I think, the Maoists originally were against multi-party democracy, they were against the monarchy, they were against India. And they were for socio-economic development. And on socio-economic development, reducing inequality, gender empowerment, when you give a gun to a 14-year-old girl and encourage her to use the gun whenever there is somebody opposing her point of view, you are spreading a certain culture of violence even as you create a sense of empowerment among women.
But that is not empowerment.
Sorry?
But that is not empowerment.
No, but in a sense, that sense of self-confidence that you see, that the Maoists have taken credit for that, and that is why in the first election,
we are referring to mid-90s as of now.
Yeah, we are talking mid. When in the first elections, after the Maoists came into the political mainstream, the Maoists came in as the single biggest party, because people thought that this is the best hope for the poverty-stricken
people. In a feudal society
people.
like Nepal, they had a lot of expectations from
Maoist camp. But after that, the Maoists have not been the number one party.
An interesting anecdote we have written in the book, in the first section, sir has mentioned that when he had an interaction with the former CM of West Bengal, Jyoti Basu, a great leader and communist leader, and he shared his insights about Nepal.
He warned me.
Don't rely too much on.
Manmohan Adhikari, the first communist prime minister of Nepal, he said a lot of nice things to us. We are very happy with the visit. After Mr. Adhikari left the room, he said, don't be taken in by these sweet words, because they are good words, but the real left is out there. Radical forces, jungle se aa rahe hain, they have their own worldview. They don't care for India-Nepal relations, etc.
So now
it's more like a chameleon. It can change colors in a flip.
So, well, we have to see.
So exactly, we would not like to equate with chameleon, but because most of them are our friends also, but they are now admitting it in public. That they are no longer, faithful to their ideology. Even they are admitting it. So that's a grave situation.
And the other thing they are admitting is that good relations with India are important for Nepal. Yes. So this again is something which will not be music to the Chinese ears.
It seems like things are going out of hand now.
So this is a Nepalese mindset. They know that which side of their bread is buttered. They know who ultimately is going to be with Nepal through thick and thin.
Makes sense.
The Chinese are there. It's a self-serving kind of relationship that they have.
Privately, even most of the top leaders, communist leaders, are also admitting all this privately, but they are working under some compulsions because they have to survive in a fledgling democracy like Nepal.
Go back in time, Ambassador Rajan. I would love to draw your attention to the time when IC-814 was hijacked. I was going through the chapter, and when you mentioned that I was out, I was actually going to give a speech, and I got a note saying that IC-814 has been hijacked, and then the Home Minister called you up, and a lot of other things happened. Would you mind sharing kya hua tha us din?
I'll be happy to share that. I must mention the fact that the IC-814 hijacking was one of a series of terrorist-related incidents where the open border between Nepal and India was being misused by the smuggling mafia, the terrorist-related nexus, and the ISI, with direct help from the Pakistan embassy in Kathmandu against India. And we were getting some help from Nepalese intelligence and also from the palace in exposing Pakistan's hand and exposing the involvement of this nexus terrorist and smuggling related.
We have called it
nexus.
terror industry in Nepal.
So it was a real industry. It's a huge industry.
It is still active?
Yes.
It became less active
But still
after
surviving.
the IC 814 hijacking, because that really, both sides woke up and they started tightening up border controls, etc., etc.
But they suddenly, what do? They smuggle guns, ammunitions.
Oh, drugs.
Drugs, ammunition,
currency, fake
explosives, fake currency, which was being collected, smuggled through diplomatic bags, collected by Pakistani diplomats, fake diplomats really, they were ISI agents, and they were being caught because of good networking between the intelligence agencies. And in fact, in one instance, a diplomat was actually caught. His house was surrounded by the security people, and because of diplomatic immunity, they could not enter. So you could see the counterfeit notes being burnt in his house and the smoke coming out of his chimney.
Oh,
better than that. And the Pakistan ambassador was inside the house also with her diplomatic colleague. But we had some help from the intelligence services, sometimes from the political masters, sometimes from the palace, in exposing them, in expelling them from Pakistan. Ek ke baad ek hua, and I think the IC 814 hijacking was a very deliberate attempt to spoil India-Nepal relations, because India was then in a very tight spot. Politically it became very difficult for the government of India to defend itself. How did this happen, etc., etc. And Nepal-India relations actually did become a little tense during that time. The hijacking took place, but Nepal cooperated very well with Indian intelligence, and it was soon proved that Nepal had no hand in it. Earlier, it was made known by our own people here, our own agencies, that maybe Nepal was involved, Nepal was a little lax, etc. But later it became clear that these were Pakistani nationals who came across from Bangladesh to India, got fake Indian passports, went back and forth, and then the guns, etc., were smuggled into the aircraft. The flight was hijacked, and finally, in exchange for some terrorists who were in Indian custody, the passengers were released and the plane was returned. But after that, the border controls were increased, but they did not give up. After that, if you remember, a few months after that were the Hrithik Roshan riots. And then later on, because the Maoist insurgency was now operating in full swing in all the 75 districts, they were operating from Indian jungles, Indian hideouts. And the ISI was in touch with them, trying to say, look, we have a common enemy in India, let us get together and fight with India. And they also, Pakistan agencies did not like the smuggling network, did not like Nepal being a Hindu monarchy. So uspe bhi kuch chal raha tha. So everyone was talking to everyone else, but the Maoists realized they could not win by force. The king did not want to use the army. The government of Nepal realized they could not defeat the Maoists by force. Thousands of people had died. There was a lot of trauma, a lot of suffering, and people wanted to end the war, and we also wanted the Maoists to get out of India. So finally, I've explained the details in the book. It actually indirectly resulted in the tragedy of the palace massacre, in which King Birendra and the entire family died. But at that time, nobody knew who was responsible. Some people thought the king's brother was responsible. Some people thought that there was international.
His own son, in fact, Dipendra was also.
The Maoists blamed India and the CIA. Even today, you will find some people in Nepal thinking that RNAW and CIA organized the hijacking together, because that is the first thought that comes to many minds in Nepal.
Sir, for all those people, for all those young lads who may not know about what exactly happened in this incident, आप एकदम brief में बस समझा सकते हैं हुआ क्या?
Well, briefly what happened was, as I said, everyone was in touch with everyone else. And the Maoists reached out to the palace. Although they were against the monarchy, they were also against multi-party democracy.
Okay.
So they reached out to the palace to see if there could be a possible understanding under which the king could have a ceremonial position. It was at a very tentative stage. And because President Narayanan had visited Nepal on a state visit and had mentioned that Indian communists had also been mainstreamed and they had joined the political parties, they had become a political party and they were part of the democratic setup and they were a peaceful force in Indian democracy. That stuck in King Birendra's mind. So when the Maoists reached out to him, he thought that this was one way of, he did not turn them down. So the first tentative contacts began, and the Maoists were also in touch with the political parties. They were also in touch with India. And someone gave an exaggerated picture to this nexus in Pakistan on two aspects. One, that the palace was helping India in curbing the terrorist related activities and smuggling activities. So the palace and India were together. And secondly, that the Maoists were going to be in touch with the palace and they might reach an understanding. Okay. And the Maoists were in touch with India. So I think after that, a lot of contacts took place between the Crown Prince and a front company run by the ISI in Kathmandu, and he was given the wrong impression that the king was willing to become a ceremonial president in exchange for peace, because the king was basically in search of peace. And he was already a very frustrated young man because the family was not allowing him to marry the young girl whom he wanted to marry. And he was under the influence of drugs and alcohol, which created a lot of change in his personality, and he became very violent at times, and the king was getting very worried. So he was sending messages to Atalji, who was then Prime Minister, but it was too late. By that time, things went out of control, and the massacre took place, and the entire family was wiped out, including the Crown Prince himself. Nobody has details as to how the Crown Prince died, because there were no post-mortem, there was no investigation, nothing. Everything was, covered up in a very rapid way, partly to save embarrassment to the palace and so on. So it was one of the great tragedies. It was a turning point in Nepal's history, really, because after that, the Maoists came on board. They joined up with the political parties. King Gyanendra, who succeeded his brother, decided to use force and get rid of democracy itself for the time being and use the army against the Maoists. One thing led to another, and the king ultimately made his own exit. The monarchy was finished as an institution.
True. आप दोनों से मेरा ये सवाल रहेगा. It's one of the penultimate questions. कि एक मोनार्की और डेमोक्रेसी, मतलब दोनों का ही मज़ा चखा है नेपाल ने ऑनेस्टली. मतलब उसने मोनार्की भी बहुत टाइम देखी है, डेमोक्रेसी अभी अभी देखी है, बट देन टू दे आर प्रीटी मच हैप्पी एंड दे हैव सीन बोथ इन स्टेइंग टुगेदर एज वेल. Is it one of the very rare situations or globally where a country has actually flourished with the fusion of both?
I think there have been many other cases where a constitutional monarchy and multi-party democracy have flourished.
UK is an example.
There are others also.
Thailand.
So it is possible, but it is very important.
Primarily ceremonial positions.
Ceremonial, with a difference that in Nepal the king had control of the army, so he was not powerless. Secondly, the king was considered to be an avatar of Lord Vishnu. So he had a certain influence among the masses.
Okay.
And he could become very popular as long as he understood the public mood.
Till the end of his life.
Yeah.
He was
Towards the
revered
end
as
of his tenure, King Birendra had become very popular. The political parties were not able to stabilize multi-party democracy. and corruption had come in, the Maoist insurgency had come in, there was a lot of dissatisfaction, frustration, etc. So slowly but surely the monarchy was becoming more popular, and within the palace everyone had not given up hope that the monarchy would become the main force again. That also one should mention. King Birendra had reconciled himself to a constitutional role, but not everyone in his family had, including his wife and his brother and so on. So in Nepal the situation was a little more confused. Some political parties, members of the political parties were loyal to the king, although they were also running for elections and so on. So the king was quite influential. But there was hope, because certainly I was very lucky during my tenure, despite political instability, relations were very stable, relations were very good. Cooperation was excellent, a lot of important agreements, a lot of important visits. So all this was being watched by our friends in Pakistan and so on. So
and how has it changed now? We are sitting in 2024.
Well, now monarchy is gone.
Yeah.
Multi-party democracy has not settled. There is a constitution which is somewhat imperfect. It was rushed through Parliament. They are thinking of amending it now. It is not a very inclusive constitution as it should be. And after
not inclusive of whom?
Inclusive of, for example, all the marginalized groups. Because the Maoists originally became very popular because they were putting forward the cause of all the disadvantaged people. You know, the Dalits, Madheshis, some of the other Janjatis, other groups, etc. But later, because of the power competition and so on, the Maoists became mainstreamed with a vengeance, like all the other parties. So the general feeling in Nepal is that they have not really carried out their promises or fulfilled expectations on this. Would you like to say something about the Madheshi?
Yes, sir. So a few points which I would like to reflect here. First of all, this is the third spell of democracy in Nepal. So they started with
they also have a 5-year tenure, right?
Panchayati system.
They also have a 5-year tenure, right?
They have, but never succeeded in getting it.
They've had umpteen governments in the last
30th. It's going to be 30th government in the last 30 years.
Every 1 year.
So the first of the series, it started in 1960s during the time of King Mahendra, the father of King Birendra. So there was a different kind of system, VDC, Village Development Councils and all. That was a very decentralized system, but under the patronage of monarchy. And monarchy was totally centralized. So it was completely cut off the rest of the country.
And the capital being Kathmandu.
Kathmandu always. But King Mahendra did a good thing. He persuaded people to go towards the plain, Madhes regions. So it created both good and bad.
And what are the plain regions, basically?
Basically, that constitutes almost half of the Nepal.
Okay.
That is called Madhes, Tarai region.
Madhes.
So you will see I'm sure you have heard about the places like Janakpur, Birganj.
Yeah.
So these all come under that.
These are Madhes. These are Madhes.
BP Koirala himself hailed from Madhes region.
Okay.
Biratnagar, the towering leader of Nepal, who also played a vital role in our freedom struggle. So second inning started in 1990 with the new constitution. That was quite progressive. We would like to add here. And under that, King Birendra became the constitutional monarch. No longer he was the
king.
Absolute monarch. No, he was the king.
But a constitutional king.
Yes. So he had a prime minister. There was a Westminster model, parliamentary democracy, everything.
बट चलाते सब वही थे.
वही चलाते थे, लेकिन डेमोक्रेटिक लीडर का नाम से था.
अच्छा, से था.
लेकिन जो इसके बाद आफ्टर एंड ऑफ दिस राउंड ऑफ मोनार्की व्हेन किंग ज्ञानेंद्र वाज इन द हेल्म, तो ये एक नया डेमोक्रेटिक सेटअप बना. फिर इसके बाद में 2015 में नया कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन आया, एज सर हैज सेड, व्हिच इज फुल विथ clauses which are not keeping everyone comfortable. So there was a long struggle for that matter in 2015, when there was also kind of blockade near the borders, which further damaged our relation with Nepal. And we had to look at the causes of that blockade. It was not imposed blockade, it was created from within. नेपाल के अंदर में ही जो कुछ political forces थे, उनके अपने fundamental reasons के कारण से वो arise हो रहा था. So the experiences are mixed in Nepal, as you have said, कि monarchy और democracy के बीच में. तो वो ऐसा नहीं था मोनार्की में सभी खुश थे. डेवलपमेंटल सिनेरियो जो बहुत ही वीक था वहाँ पे. So people had expectations from democratic forces, mainly from the Maoist forces, but now they are disillusioned. But they but they have faith in democracy, no doubt about it, and they should have the faith in democracy.
Well, it's a new age country. It's a new country.
It's still being shaped up, but with remarkable achievements. There are many, shortcomings, but Nepali democracy is reasonably doing well. If we will not count only the
they are on the right track, I would say.
But are they doing good in terms of economic development? And
not really. No, not really. It's in the
they are not paying enough attention to development.
But do they have avenues and potential?
They have potential.
They have?
Yep, yes.
There are serious shortcomings in both governance and quality of democracy, and the scale and depth of corruption is, even by South Asian standards, it's...
priority is different. Yeah, different kind of priority.
I love the way you mentioned by South Asian standards also, it's surpassing the whole.
We are not fortunate to say that we are totally
we are not
isolated
perfect.
from...
We know the imperfections and shortcomings of Indian democracy.
Yeah, true.
But in Nepal, I think people are very, very restless now about the quality of democracy and the quality of governance. So it is a long transition. Some people call it a chaotic transition. And India will have to devise a strategy when we talk about planning for the future, in which all the political parties are together and there is a grand vision of inclusive, accelerated development in Nepal, which will make every Nepali realize that India is a real partner and not China. So both of us have been suggesting this, that what you need is a very holistic vision, education, health, inclusive development, all-round development. These become an India-Nepal partnership goal. And then I think, because China cannot compete with India, it can try as hard as it likes.
It can't compete.
Even now it can't.
No, we are saying is just because we are Indians, or there's like a hypothesis.
That's the reality. That's the reality. We are far ahead in Nepal.
But if we are complacent, then very soon even the roti beti rishta that we talk about, that will become very weak. Already it is becoming weaker, because you must have read in the papers that sometime back, briefly, when the Communist Party and the Maoist Party came together to form a government just a few days back, the one major decision that they took was to print Nepal's map, the map of border areas as claimed by Nepal, on 100 rupee notes, Nepali 100 rupee notes. So if that happens, where is the roti beti rishta if every Nepali thinks that India is sitting on Nepali territory? So the two countries which are least interested in people-to-people relations between India and Nepal are China and Pakistan. So they are definitely forces at work to undermine the traditional friendship between India and Nepal. So India has to be very careful, and if we have the strategic plan in place, then I think there is a good chance that in a few years democracy in Nepal will stabilize, and India-Nepal relationship will also stabilize in a way which we have not been able to achieve.
Can a reverse of what you are mentioning happen? Like again the monarchy takes place?
Well,
hypothetically,
theoretically it is possible, because some people in Nepal are already working towards that objective, and Gyanendra, the former king, occasionally comes out in public and warns that he cannot be a spectator to what is happening.
And he still maintains that he is Vishnu avatar?
No. That is. But my own feeling is the monarchy coming back is not a very
good sign,
likely proposition at all.
See, we should not say good or bad sign, because it's a sovereign
country.
But for one thing, we would like to add here, that it's not going to be an absolute monarchy again in Nepal.
Yeah, that is not possible.
वो शेर के मुंह में एक बार खून लग जाए तो पता रहता है कि अच्छा.
Constitutional monarchy.
Everyone has learned.
Yeah, agree. Now they have tasted what democracy is.
And you need institutions. The problem in Nepal is there are no institutions now. Most of the institutions have got politicized. So they act according to
including the birth of the president.
Yes.
Surprisingly, yes.
But isn't that the case with every possible country?
No,
where
not in our country.
No.
We can still say that.
Yeah.
That institution.
I
is
think,
insulated.
No, but politicizing institution, that's a case
That's
with
different.
every possibility,
but
possibly every country.
we have a
It is
certain...
totally complicit into micromanagement.
Yeah,
The
we have a certain tradition
office of
which
president.
we have to give credit to the British also. The democratic tradition that was built up, public opinion, etc., is a major force here. So the president cannot act in too partisan a manner.
True.
Nor can the speaker, etc., etc. But in Nepal, this is happening openly, blatantly, very often. So, for example, the former president...
Not the incumbent president, but the previous one.
Former president.
Former president, not the incumbent
Former president was a UML nominee, a communist UML
Vidyadevi
nominee.
Bhandari ji.
She finished her term, she has rejoined the UML, and she is going to stand for the president's post in the UML, and she has already been invited by the Chinese to pay an official visit to China. So, it's all mixed up there. So, institutions are not strong enough in Nepal. That is
About the potential side, you said that whether Nepal has potential or not, it has tremendous potential, especially at the front of hydroelectricity. It can illuminate entire Asia. It has such capacity. And now
like that much?
Yes, tremendous possibility. So the government of India has given an order of 10,000 megawatt import. But this is an ambitious target, very, very ambitious target.
True.
Considering during the peak seasons, Nepal is importing the electricity from Bihar grids. And that too unclean electricity, thermal
well,
power.
we are talking
but
of
there is
an
possibility,
agreement
good
for
possibility
10,000
going forward.
megawatts in 10 years.
Yeah, 10 years.
Now that's an agreement, it's a goal, but the
The order
delivery is
has
another
been
question.
already placed by Indian government to Nepal.
But they need
So
to maintain
they need to
create the
export it,
infrastructure.
export it. So it's happening. And
No, that is where
happening.
consensus is very important. All political parties in both countries have to come together for the sake of the people of India, people of Nepal, and future generations. We have to think, of working together, working out this kind of a strategy of all-round accelerated
So
development.
that is one sector, and if we look at other sectors like tourism,
It's doing very good.
Very well,
Yeah.
very, very well.
It's doing
Then
very
in
good,
food
yeah.
processing, agriculture, banking, telecom, everywhere.
In banking telecom?
Yeah. So SBI
Even
has-
globally?
Not globally.
Okay.
State Bank of India has an operation in Nepal.
And
That's
it's
for
the
Nepal.
most successful branch of State Bank of India anywhere in the
highest
world.
profit earning operation of SBI anywhere in the world.
Wow.
But that runs in the private sector as Nepal SBI Bank Limited. Then Hindustan Unilever and many other conglomerates like
Dabur.
Dabur, Varun
Very
Beverages and others.
Despite changes of government in Nepal,
But
these have
we are
prospered.
little worried about the slow pace of investment going from India to Nepal.
At the moment, there is very little investment because of the instability.
So
and-
most of these companies came during such time in 90s, early 90s, mid 90s.
Agreed.
Yeah. So
No, of course, if a brand does not see a potential and see a geopolitical conflict, obviously it won't.
But the profit margin is there. So this is like Tata. Tata has very sound presence in Nepal.
Very
So
cool.
our companies are doing well in Nepal in joint ventures.
But what is their export? Like, do they have apart
Very
from the
little, very
hydro?
Very little.
No, there again, India has to be much more generous. And India was generous when Narasimha Rao was Prime Minister and so on. When we agreed that anything manufactured in Nepal, even if the local manufacturing content was very small, could have duty-free access to the Indian market. So Nepal's exports to India shot up, India's exports to Nepal shot up, investments in both directions shot up. But then, sometimes
No joke
small
happened.
calculations,
So
small
that
lobbies.
hiccups are the reasons, but not only hiccups. Then we have moved on as a country, as an economy after 1991. We, as an economy,
We should show more generosity
Yes.
and more self-confidence.
So
Makes sense.
That's
Nepal
important.
used to be very close with India before 1991 in trade terms. After that, India has moved to a different territory.
Sure.
So now they need to catch up, but we need to be little more generous.
The important thing is that India should not be thinking of going to the global high table and becoming a major global economic power by itself, leaving its neighbors
Yes,
behind,
yes.
particularly Nepal.
Not only a neighbor, Nepal is like a younger brother.
Younger brother, absolutely.
Absolutely.
So Nepal should feel that riding on India's shoulders, it has a tremendous future. And that is what we are proposing again and again that there should be a partnership between India and Nepal.
And it's also for the younger brother to take care of the elder
Absolutely.
brother.
Especially so
and not just go around
see, India's growth agenda
and joining some
credential-
other gang.
India's growth agenda and credential has been very, has been very positive
True.
and credible. So there is natural propensity where Nepal can come forward and be the partner.
I
in this
think the
growth.
future is bright in spite of all the hiccups because of the overall awareness in both countries, cutting across party lines, that relations are important. And I think in a long-term sense, the two countries can work together and create a framework in which the trajectory can be a positive one.
On that note, I guess this is the end of the podcast. Very quick messages from both of you. If anybody is planning to visit Nepal, where should they go? You've been an Indian ambassador in Nepal. Of course, you will be the correct person to answer this.
Well, I think every part of Nepal is fascinating in its own way. There are isolated areas in the mountains where very few people go. Rara Lake, for example.
Rara Lake, okay.
Absolutely out of the world.
Mustang.
But on the touristic circuit, I would say Pokhara is an ideal place, very easy access. The most
Janakpur.
stunning views of the mountains that you can have, pristine views of snow-capped mountains, and then down south it's a totally different landscape, so close to India in terms of culture, language, etc., habits, very close in terms of religious bonding. The Buddhist pilgrimage center in Lumbini,
Janakpur.
in Janakpur, is very much part of the Ayodhya
And not to
tourist,
forget Kathmandu.
Kathmandu, of course.
Kathmandu, of course, is
Pashupatinath
Yes.
is a...
absolutely, Chardham,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Swambhunath, Pashupatinath.
So,
There are so many. Old
And what should they
palaces.
eat?
Everything you like.
I think
Nepal offers
many
wonderful
possibilities. Nepal has huge variety of wonderful dishes which many Indians don't know about. Newari food, the way they cook, even dal, roti, rice, etc., is very different and
Okay.
very unique. Then I think in the Madhesh area also you get
Yes,
excellent
yes,
food, very close to Indian food. Tibetan type of food, Chinese food up north.
It's like a proper cocktail of all the...
Yes.
Cocktail, absolutely.
And
Very
most,
diverse.
Southeast
most
Asia.
importantly, they are warm hosts. They are wonderful people.
Very
They will treat you
hospitable.
very well.
Some of the hotels in Nepal are among the best in the world.
Really?
Yeah,
yes.
and for a long time now.
But that is primarily because of the exodus of tourists towards Mount Everest, or
Maybe.
in general they are...
everywhere. They have a great sense of hospitality.
Okay.
Great sense of hospitality.
It's a welcoming country.
Yeah.
It welcomes you.
On that note, I guess this is the end
you.
of this podcast. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Thank you for
Ambassador
having
Rajan
us.
and
Thank
Atul, for having this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.